On my way home for Thanksgiving, I got into a horrible car accident. The doctor called my son saying, "Your mother needs emergency surgery or she might not survive," but instead of rushing over, my son said, "I'm hosting a Thanksgiving party. If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight." Hours later, I woke up and my chart read, "New legal guardian assigned," and that guardian was, "If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight. Asterisk asterisk while you're fighting for your life." Because that's precisely what my son Jason said when they called him for emergency surgery consent, my emergency surgery. My name is Helen and I'm 73 years old. That Thanksgiving, on my way home, my life almost ended on a highway. A terrible car accident. The doctor called my son, saying, "Your mother needs emergency surgery or she may not make it." But instead of rushing to my side, Jason uttered those chilling words. I didn't hear them myself, of course. I was unconscious, bleeding internally, with 3 fractured ribs and a partially collapsed lung. But later, when I woke up with tubes in my arms and a breathing mask fogging with my shallow breaths, a kind nurse told me exactly what had been said. "I want you to understand something. I've buried a husband, raised a child alone, survived breast cancer, and learned to live on a fixed income that barely stretches. I thought I knew heartbreak. I was wrong. What I'm about to share needs to be heard. It needs to be remembered." The first thing I remember in that hospital room was the relentless beeping. Then the smell, that sterile cocktail of antiseptic and floor cleaner that screams somewhere serious. My eyes felt glued shut. When I finally pried them open, the fluorescent lights above me were blinding. Everything hurt. Not a sharp, screaming pain, but a deep, whole-body ache that told me something very, very bad had happened. My chest was tight, restricted. My left arm throbbed. A fire shot through my ribs when I tried to shift. A young nurse appeared, her eyes kind but tired. "Helen," she whispered. "Can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. She dabbed my lips with water. "Don't try to talk just yet. You've been through a lot. You were in a car accident yesterday evening. Do you remember? Thanksgiving evening. Driving to Jason's house. The pies in the back. The highway. The truck that came out of nowhere. The impact." I nodded, just barely. "You're at County General," she continued. "You had serious injuries. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, a partially collapsed lung. You needed emergency surgery." Surgery? The word felt heavy, strange. I hadn't consented to surgery, had I? My mind was a blur after the airbag deployed. "We tried to reach your emergency contact," she said, her voice shifting, becoming careful, measured. "Your son, Jason, is that right?" I nodded again. Jason. My only child. The boy I raised alone after his father died. The man I still called every Sunday, even though he rarely answered. The one always too busy. Surely, in an emergency, he would have come. Surely he would have dropped everything. The nurse's expression tightened slightly. She glanced towards the door, then back at me. "Helen, I need to tell you something, and I want you to stay calm. Your vitals are stable now, but you need to rest." My heart pounded. The monitor beeped faster. "What happened?" I managed to whisper. She hesitated, then pulled a chair closer. "When you were brought in, you were in critical condition. Doctors determined you needed immediate surgery. But because you were unconscious, they needed consent from your next of kin." "Jason," I breathed. "Yes." The staff called him multiple times. They explained the situation. They told him you might not make it through the night without the procedure. My chest tightened. Not from the injury this time, but from something cold and creeping. The nurse's jaw tightened. She looked me straight in the eye, and I could see she didn't want to say what came next, but she did anyway. He said, and I'm quoting directly from the notes here, asterisk asterisk, "If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight." The room went silent, save for the machines. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to tell me it was a mistake, a cruel joke. She didn't. "He said he was hosting a Thanksgiving party," she continued quietly. "He told the staff he couldn't leave. He refused to come to the hospital. He refused to sign the consent forms." I couldn't breathe. Not because of my lung, but because the weight of those words had just collapsed everything inside me. Asterisk, "If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight." Asterisk, my son. My only son. The boy I'd rocked to sleep, the teenager I'd worked 2 jobs to send to college, the man I'd bailed out of financial trouble more than once. He couldn't be bothered, not to leave his party. Not to sign a paper that might save my life. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of this stranger. "Then how?" I started, my voice shaking. "How am I here? How did the surgery happen?" The nurse's expression softened. "Someone else signed," she said. I blinked. "What?" "Someone else showed up. Someone who wasn't listed as your emergency contact, but who knew you. He convinced the doctors to let him sign as your temporary medical guardian. He stayed through the entire surgery. He's been checking on you every few hours since." My mind scrambled. "Who?" She glanced at her clipboard. "His name is Jamal Carter." The world tilted. Jamal. I hadn't heard that name in a decade, maybe longer. "Jamal Carter," I repeated, barely audible. She nodded. "Do you know him?" Did I know him? Oh, I knew him. But why on earth would he be here? Why would he care? As I lay there, with Jason's words still ringing in my ears and a ghost from my past suddenly reappearing, I realized something. My life had almost ended on that highway. But something else had ended too. The nurse stood up. He left his number with the front desk, said to call him when you woke up. Should I? I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning, my heart breaking and mending and breaking again, all at once. Finally, I whispered yes. Because whoever Jamal Carter was now, whatever had brought him to this hospital, he had done something my own son wouldn't. He had shown up. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment everything changed. It was Thanksgiving Eve, late afternoon. The sky was already darkening, that early winter dusk that comes too soon. I was driving on Interstate 94, heading toward Jason's house. My hands gripped the wheel a little too tightly. I had 2 pumpkin pies and a green bean casserole, the one Jason used to ask for, even though he hadn't in 15 years. Old habits. My mind was running through its usual checklist of worries. Would Brooke, Jason's wife, find something wrong with what I brought? Last Easter, she'd handed my deviled eggs back and suggested I bring wine next time. This year, I told myself I wouldn't try so hard. I wouldn't hover. I would just be present. Quiet, grateful to be included. But the truth was, I was desperate. Desperate to feel like I mattered to my own child. The highway stretched ahead. Traffic was light, Thanksgiving travelers. I wondered how many were driving toward people who actually wanted them there. I shook the thought away. Jason wanted me there. He'd invited me, hadn't he? Well, Brooke had sent a text 3 weeks ago, with the time and a reminder to please arrive promptly. That counted. Traffic slowed as I approached the junction. Construction had narrowed the lanes. I eased off the gas. Defensive driving, my late husband used to say. Helen, you drive like you're taking a test every time. Maybe I did. Then I saw it. A semi-truck in my rearview mirror, a quarter mile back, moving faster than everything else. Weaving. Impatient. I moved into the right lane to let it pass. But the truck moved right too. Then everything happened at once. The car in front of me braked suddenly. I hit my own brakes. No problem. But the truck behind me didn't slow. I saw it in my mirror. Still coming. Way too fast. For a split second, I thought maybe the driver would swerve. He didn't. The impact was like being hit by a wall of sound and force and terror. Metal shrieked. Glass exploded. My body jerked forward against the seatbelt, something cracking in my chest. The airbag deployed with a bang that left my ears ringing. My head snapped sideways. Pain shot down my neck. The car spun. I remember that part clearly. The world outside became a blur. I screamed. Absurdly, I thought about the pies, definitely ruined. Then the car hit something else. A guardrail? Another vehicle? A second impact. My head hit the window hard enough that everything went white. When the car finally stopped, I was facing the wrong direction. Cars stopped all around, hazard lights blinking. Steam poured from my crumpled hood. The airbag had deflated, leaving chalky powder everywhere. I tried to move. My arms responded barely. My legs wouldn't. A pressure in my chest, like someone sitting on me. And pain. God, the pain. It radiated from my ribs, my back, my head. I could hear shouting. Footsteps. A man's voice. Lady, can you hear me? Stay still. Don't move. I wanted to tell him I couldn't if I tried. More voices. Someone calling 911. Someone trying to open my jammed door. Time became strange. Flashing lights. Metal being cut. Hands reaching in, gentle but urgent. Asking questions. What's your name? Helen. Who can we call? Jason. My son. Call Jason. They lifted me out, onto a stretcher. Lightning bolts of agony. You're doing great, Helen. We're almost there. Stay with me, okay? The paramedic said. I tried to nod. The hospital was chaos. Bright lights. Voices. They wheeled me into a room full of people in scrubs. Someone cut my clothes off. I remember feeling embarrassed, even through the pain. My underwear was old, worn. I hadn't expected anyone to see it. A doctor appeared, his face partially hidden by a mask. Helen, I'm Dr. Shapiro. You've been in a serious accident. We need to run some tests. They moved me again into a CT scanner. Asterisk whir. Click, asterisk when they pulled me out. The doctor's face was grimmer. We need to get her into surgery. She's bleeding internally. Possible splenic rupture. 3 fractured ribs, one of which has partially collapsed the left lung. Surgery, the word registered. I needed someone to sign. I needed Jason. A nurse appeared with a phone. We're calling your emergency contact now. Relief washed over me. Jason would come. He'd be worried, upset, but he'd be there. I heard the phone ring on speaker. Once, twice, 3 times. Then Jason's voice, distant and distracted. Hello, is this Jason Whitmore? Yeah, who's this? This is County General Hospital. We have your mother, Helen Whitmore, in our emergency room. She's been in a serious car accident and needs immediate surgery. We need you to come in and sign consent forms. A pause. Music and laughter in the background. A party? How serious? Jason asked. The nurse glanced at the doctor. Life-threatening. Without surgery in the next hour, she may not survive. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, in a tone I'd never heard from my son, flat and cold, completely devoid of concern, he said the words that would replay in my head for the rest of my life. I'm hosting Thanksgiving. If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight. The line went dead. The nurse stared at the phone, her expression frozen in disbelief. Dr. Shapiro's jaw tightened. Call again. He couldn't have meant that. But I knew, even as the darkness pulled me under, even as they lowered the mask over my face and told me to count backward from 10, I knew my son had meant every single word. When I woke up the second time, the pain was different. Duller. Manageable. Whatever they'd given me was working, wrapping everything in a soft, medicinal haze. The same nurse was there. She noticed my eyes open and smiled, but it was a sad smile. How are you feeling? She asked. Sore, I finally managed. That's to be expected. You've been through major surgery, but you came through beautifully. Dr. Shapiro was able to stop the bleeding. Your lung is reinflated. You're going to be okay, Helen. Physically, maybe, but there were other kinds of damage no surgeon could fix. The memory of what she'd told me before came rushing back. Jason's words. His refusal. The flatness in his voice. I must have made some kind of sound, because her expression shifted to concern. Do you need more pain medication? I shook my head. The pain I was feeling wasn't the kind that came in a syringe. She pulled the chair closer again. Helen, I know what I told you earlier was incredibly hard to hear, but I want you to know that you're not alone. Someone made sure of that. I looked at her confused. After your son refused to sign the consent forms, we were in a very difficult position. We couldn't legally proceed without next of kin approval, but we also couldn't just let you die. Dr. Shapiro was about to petition for an emergency judicial override when someone showed up in the waiting room. My heart beat faster. A man came to the front desk asking about you. He'd heard about the accident on the police scanner. Used to be a volunteer firefighter, apparently, and he still listens to the emergency channels. When he heard your name, he drove straight here. Who? I whispered, though I already knew. She looked down at her clipboard. Jamal Carter. Jamal. The name settled over me like a blanket, heavy with memory and time. He convinced Dr. Shapiro to let him sign as your temporary medical guardian. It's not standard procedure, but given the circumstances, and given that your listed emergency contact had explicitly refused. She trailed off. I closed my eyes, trying to picture Jamal. He'd been in his early 20s then. Tall, lean, with eyes that held too much hurt for someone so young. He stayed through your entire surgery, the nurse continued. Sat in the waiting room for 4 hours. When Dr. Shapiro came out to tell him you'd made it through, he cried. My chest tightened, and it had nothing to do with my broken ribs. He's been back 3 times since then to check on you. Left his phone number at the desk and made us promise to call him the moment you woke up. Which, if you're up for it, I'd like to do now. I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. She walked to the phone. I watched her dial, heard the faint ringing. Then a voice answered. Male, deeper than I remembered, but with a warmth I recognized immediately. This is Jamal. Mr. Carter, this is County General. Helen is awake. She's stable and doing well. A pause. Then a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both. Thank God. Thank God. Can I come see her? The nurse looked at me. I nodded again. Yes, she's indicated she'd like that. Visiting hours are until 8. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line clicked off. He sounds like a good man, she said quietly. I thought about the boy I'd known. The teenager who'd shown up at the church food pantry, hungry and alone. The young man who'd sat at my kitchen table doing homework while I made dinner, both of us pretending he wasn't sleeping in his car most nights. He is, I whispered. Or he was. I don't know what he is now. Well, you'll find out soon enough. She checked her watch. I'm going to give you a few minutes to rest before he arrives. But Helen, there's something else I need to tell you. My stomach dropped. What? The hospital tried calling your son again, multiple times, to let him know you'd made it through surgery. That you were stable. He didn't answer any of the calls. His wife finally picked up on the 6th try. What did she say? The nurse's lips pressed into a thin line. She said, and I quote, "We're aware of the situation. We'll deal with it after the holiday." After the holiday, I was lying in a hospital bed, having barely survived surgery, and they'd deal with it after the holiday. Something inside me shifted. Not broke exactly, it had already been broken, but it shifted into a new configuration. A harder one. I see, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm so sorry, Helen. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but I thought you should know. She hesitated, then left. I lay there in the quiet, listening to the machine's beep, feeling an ache in my chest that had nothing to do with fractured bones. 20 years. That's how long I'd been a mother to a child who'd grown into a man I didn't recognize. 20 years of showing up, making excuses, convincing myself his distance was just his personality. I'd been lying to myself, and now I was paying the price for all those lies. But Jamal had come. A boy I'd fed and sheltered so long ago had dropped everything. Had fought to sign papers for a woman who wasn't his mother, wasn't his family. Just someone who'd shown him a little kindness when he needed it most. Why would he do that? The question rattled around in my head, bumping against all the other questions I didn't have answers for. Asterisk, why had Jason become the kind of man who could say those words? Where had I gone wrong? Asterisk, I didn't have long to sit with those thoughts. 15 minutes later, quick, purposeful footsteps in the hallway. A soft knock. Come in, I called. The door opened, and there he was. Jamal Carter. 30-something now, filled out in the shoulders, a neat beard. His eyes found mine immediately, and I saw relief flood through them. Miss Helen, he said, and his voice cracked on my name. I'd forgotten he used to call me that. Miss Helen, like I was somebody worth respecting. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands hovering uncertainly. It's okay, I whispered. I'm not that fragile. He took my hand gently, carefully, like I was made of glass. And then he said the words I'd been waiting my whole life to hear from my own son. I'm so glad you're okay. I was so scared I was going to lose you. The tears I'd been holding back finally broke free. I'm sorry, he said, his face crumpling. I didn't mean to make you cry. No, I managed. No, these are good tears. He pulled the chair close and sat down, still holding my hand. And for the first time since I'd woken up in this hospital, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was going to be all right. We just looked at each other. 2 people separated by years, trying to find the thread that connected us. He changed so much, from the weary, underfed teenager I remembered to a man with steady eyes and capable hands. But when he smiled, tentative and uncertain, I saw the boy I'd known. You probably have questions, he said finally. A few, I admitted. Starting with how you even knew I was here. He leaned back in the chair, but didn't let go of my hand. I still listened to the scanner. Old habit from my firefighting days. I heard the call come through about the accident on 94. Multiple vehicle collision, elderly female driver being transported to County General in critical condition. They said your name. And you just came. Of course I came, he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Miss Helen, you saved my life once. You think I wouldn't show up when you needed help? I shook my head slightly. Jamal, that was so long ago. You didn't owe me anything. His expression hardened, just a fraction. That's not how it works. Not for me. The way he said it made me wonder what his life had been like in all the years since we'd lost touch. But before I could ask, he spoke again. Do you remember the first time we met? I smiled, despite everything. The church basement. You were trying to steal food from the pantry. I wasn't trying, he corrected. I was succeeding. Until you walked in. The memory came back sharp and clear. It had been a Wednesday evening. I'd been volunteering at St. Mark's. I heard a noise from the storage area. At first, I thought it was a rat. But when I investigated, I found a teenage boy stuffing bread and canned soup into a backpack. He froze when he saw me, eyes wide, ready to bolt. I was terrified you'd call the police, Jamal said now. I was terrified you'd run before I could help you, I replied. I'd walked over to the shelf, pulled down more cans, added peanut butter and crackers, and handed them to him. If you're going to take food, I'd said, at least take things that'll keep you fed. He'd stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. What's your name? I'd asked. Jamal. Well, Jamal, when's the last time you had a hot meal? He'd shrugged. Come on, I'd said. I'm making dinner anyway. Might as well make extra. Looking back, I know how reckless that was. Inviting a strange teenager to my home. But something in his eyes told me he wasn't dangerous, just desperate. Just alone. He'd followed me home, cautious as a stray cat. Sat at my kitchen table while I made spaghetti and meatballs, watching me like he expected it all to disappear. He ate like he hadn't seen food in days. He probably hadn't. I thought you were crazy, Jamal said now, bringing me back to the present. Nobody just helps people like that. Not without wanting something. I didn't want anything. I know that now. But back then, I kept waiting for the catch. Kept waiting for you to tell me what I owed you. You didn't owe me anything. You kept saying that. Every time I came over, every time you fed me or let me do laundry or helped me with homework, you'd say, you don't owe me anything, Jamal. This is just what people do. He paused. Except it wasn't what people did. Not in my experience. I knew some of his story. He'd been in foster care since he was 11. Bounced between homes that didn't want him. By 16, he'd aged out of the system's interest. Too old to be cute, too young to be independent. He'd been sleeping in his car. You became a regular at my table, I said. 3 nights a week. He smiled. But there was pain in it. You never made me feel like charity. You just said you made too much food, or you needed help moving furniture, or you wanted company. You always found a way to make it seem like I was doing you a favor. You were, I said softly. I was lonely. My husband had been gone 5 years by then. Jason was away at college, calling less and less. The house felt too big, too quiet. Having Jamal around helped fill that silence. You taught me things, he continued. How to balance a checkbook. How to file taxes. How to change a tire. All the stuff nobody had ever bothered to show me. Basic life skills. Everyone should know those things. You also taught me that not everyone in the world was out to hurt me. That was a harder lesson. I remembered the walls he'd built. How long it had taken him to trust me. The first time he truly laughed at one of my jokes. What happened after you graduated high school? I asked. We'd lost touch around then. I joined the fire department as a volunteer. Needed something structured, you know, something that felt like it mattered. Did that for a few years, then went to trade school. I'm an electrician now. Have my own small business. Pride swelled in my chest. Jamal, that's wonderful. It's honest work. Pays the bills. I've got a little house over on Maple Street. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. He paused. I looked for you a few times over the years. Drove by your old place, but you'd moved. I downsized after Jason got married. Didn't need all that space anymore. I should have tried harder to find you. Life gets busy. I understand. No. His voice was firm. There's no excuse. You were there for me when nobody else was. I should have been there for you. You're here now, I said quietly. That's what matters. He looked down at our joined hands. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. When I heard your name on that scanner, Miss Helen, I swear my heart stopped. And when I got here and they told me what your son said. He stopped, jaw clenching. I'm sorry. I shouldn't talk about him. It's all right. It's not all right. None of this is all right. He met my eyes. You deserved better than that. You deserved someone who gave a damn. The tears threatened again, but I blinked them back. I kept one of your sayings with me all these years, Jamal said. Do you remember what you used to tell me when I'd mess up or feel like I wasn't worth anything? I thought back. So many conversations. You'd say, everybody deserves someone who shows up. You just haven't found yours yet. His voice cracked. You were mine, Miss Helen. You were the person who showed up. So, when I heard you needed someone, there was no question. Of course, I was coming. Of course, I was going to make sure you were okay. I couldn't speak. Couldn't find words big enough for what I was feeling. He squeezed my hand gently. You told me to call you anytime. That someone ought to show up for me. Well, now it's my turn. Someone ought to show up for you. And right there in that hospital room, I understood something profound. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who remember what you gave them when you had nothing to gain. Sometimes it's the ones who show up. Jamal stayed until the nurses kicked him out at the end of visiting hours. I'll be back tomorrow, he promised. First thing in the morning. You don't have to do that. You must have work. I'm the boss. I can move things around. He smiled. Besides, where else would I be? After he left, I lay in the dark, listening to the night sounds of the hospital. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Jason's voice. That flat, disinterested tone. If she dies, let me know. How does a mother reconcile that? How do you make peace with the fact that the person you brought into this world, the child you sacrificed everything for, couldn't be bothered to save your life? I'd spent 20 years making excuses for him. Asterisk, he's busy. He's stressed. His wife is demanding. He's just not good at showing affection. Asterisk, but this wasn't about affection. This was about basic human decency. And my son had failed that test spectacularly. Morning came slowly. A different nurse brought breakfast. You have a visitor, she said cheerfully. That nice young man from yesterday's back. Jamal appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag from the bakery. I know hospital food is terrible, he said, setting everything down. Brought you a blueberry muffin. Still your favorite. I stared at him. You remembered that? I remember a lot of things. He settled into the chair. How'd you sleep? Not great. Yeah, I figured. He handed me a coffee. Light and sweet, right? Right. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. It was good coffee. The small kindness of it made my throat tight. I've been thinking, Jamal said finally. About what happens when you get out of here? I go home, I suppose. Back to my apartment. By myself. With broken ribs and recovery ahead of you. I'll manage. I always do. He set his coffee down and looked at me seriously. Miss Helen, I'm going to ask you something. Has your son called? Has he come by? Has he checked on you at all? The answer sat heavy in my chest. No. His wife. No. Jamal's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice even. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. You're not going home alone. You're coming to stay with me for a few days, maybe a week, until you're steady on your feet. Jamal, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm telling you. His tone was gentle but firm. I've got a guest room. It's small, but it's comfortable. I work from home half the time anyway. And before you argue, let me remind you that you did the exact same thing for me about 100 times. That was different. How? You were a kid. You needed help. And you don't. He leaned forward. Miss Helen, you almost died 3 days ago. You had major surgery. You can't lift anything. Can't drive. Probably can't even shower by yourself without help. That's not weakness. That's just reality. I wanted to protest, but the truth was I was terrified of going back to my empty apartment, of being alone with nothing but my thoughts and the echo of my son's cruelty. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. He looked surprised. You really don't know? I gave you some meals. Let you use my washing machine. That doesn't warrant all this. Is that really what you think you did? He shook his head slowly. Miss Helen, you gave me the first safe place I'd had in 5 years. You treated me like I mattered, like I was worth something. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I just did what anyone would do. Now, his voice was sharp. Not angry, but insistent. That's not what anyone would do. Most people crossed the street when they saw me. Most people assumed I was trouble. You saw a hungry kid and you fed him. You saw someone struggling and you helped. No judgment. No conditions. No strings attached. You were a good kid. I was a scared kid. An angry kid. I shoplifted. I skipped school. I got into fights. I wasn't some innocent victim. He paused. But you looked past all that. You saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. I didn't know what to say to that. There was this moment, Jamal continued, his voice softer now. Must have been 2 months after we met. I was at your place doing homework, and I knocked over a glass of water. Just an accident, but I flinched so hard I nearly fell out of the chair. I was waiting for you to yell, to hit me, to throw me out. I remembered that night. The way he'd gone pale, his whole body tensed. You just handed me some paper towels and said, No use crying over spilled water. Then you got me another glass and went back to making dinner like nothing happened. He smiled, but his eyes were wet. That's when I knew you were different. That's when I started to believe maybe the world wasn't all bad. Oh, Jamal. You told me that night you'd call me anytime. That someone ought to show up for me. I never forgot that. Never. He reached out and took my hand again. So when I heard you were here, when I found out what your son said, there was no question in my mind. Someone needed to show up for you. And that someone was going to be me. The tears came then, hot and fast. You don't think I'd let you die, do you, Miss Helen? His voice broke. After everything you did for me, you don't think I'd just walk away? I don't deserve this, I whispered. Yes, you do. You deserve every bit of kindness you showed me reflected back at you 1,000 times over. He squeezed my hand. And if your son can't see that, if he's too busy or too cold or too whatever to be here, then that's his loss, his failure, not yours. Something shifted in me. A weight I'd been carrying for years, the weight of constantly trying to earn my son's love, suddenly felt lighter. I raised him wrong, I said. I must have. Otherwise, he wouldn't be like this. No, Jamal's voice was firm. You can't blame yourself for how he turned out. You did your best. Sometimes people just choose to be selfish. That's on them, not you. But how did I not see it? How did I miss all the signs? Because you loved him. And love makes us blind sometimes. He paused. But you know what? I think part of you did see it. You just didn't want to believe it. He was right. Some part of me had always known that Jason's distance wasn't just personality or circumstance. It was a choice. He'd chosen his comfort over my needs, his convenience over my life. What do I do now? I asked. Now, Jamal smiled. Now you let me take care of you for a change. You rest, you heal, and you stop making excuses for people who don't deserve them. A knock on the door interrupted us. Another nurse appeared. Helen, there's someone here to see you. She glanced at Jamal, then back at me, her expression uncertain. Your daughter-in-law. My stomach dropped. Brooke, Jason's wife. Jamal stood immediately, his posture protective. Do you want me to stay? I thought about it. Part of me wanted him to leave, to avoid the confrontation. But another part, a stronger part, wanted him right there beside me. Yes, I said. Please stay. He nodded and moved to stand near the head of my bed. Send her in, I told the nurse. The door opened wider and Brooke walked in. Perfectly styled, blonde hair, expensive clothes. That expression she always wore that suggested she was tolerating something unpleasant. Her eyes swept over me briefly, then landed on Jamal with obvious disapproval. Mother Helen, she said, her voice cool and formal. She never called me Mom. Always Mother Helen, like it was a title, not a relationship. I see you recovering. She didn't sit down. Didn't come closer. Just stood near the door. We were quite shocked to hear about your accident. Shocked, not worried, not concerned. Were you? It wasn't a question. Of course, Jason has been beside himself. Well, you know how busy he is. The holiday. The guests. His work obligations. Brooke waved her hand dismissively. It's been very stressful. I nearly died, I said quietly. She had the grace to look uncomfortable, but only for a moment. Yes, well, these things happen. The important thing is you're fine now. No thanks to your husband. Her lips thinned. I don't know what you've been told, but Jason tried his best to handle the situation appropriately. Appropriately? I let the words sit there. Is that what we're calling it? Jamal spoke then, his voice low and controlled. The hospital has a recording of the phone call. Would you like to hear what your husband actually said? Brooke's eyes widened slightly. She looked at Jamal like she was seeing him for the first time. And you are? Someone who actually showed up, he replied evenly. She turned back to me, clearly flustered. Look, I came here as a courtesy. To make sure you were being taken care of. To see what you needed. What I needed was for my son to sign a piece of paper, so I wouldn't die on an operating table. That's what I needed. And he couldn't be bothered. He was hosting important clients. It was a business obligation. I was dying. You're being dramatic. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not violently. Just a clean, sharp break. Get out, I said. Brooke blinked. Excuse me. Get out of my room. And tell my son that if he wants to speak to me, he can come himself. I'm done with intermediaries. Mother Helen, you're being unreasonable. Out. My voice was stronger now. Now. She stood there for another moment, then turned on her expensive heels and walked out. The door swung shut with a soft click. The silence that followed felt enormous. Then Jamal started laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes from relief and pride and joy all mixed together. Miss Helen, he said, grinning. That was beautiful. And despite everything, despite the pain and the heartbreak and the betrayal, I found myself smiling too. Because for the first time in 20 years, I'd stopped making excuses. And it felt like freedom. The days that followed Brooke's visit settled into a strange rhythm. Physical therapy in the mornings, painful but necessary. Meals I could barely taste. Sleep that came in fits and starts. And through it all, the deafening silence from my son. No phone call, no text message. Not even a generic flower delivery. Nothing. Jamal came every day, sometimes twice. He'd bring me things from the outside world, a magazine, a decent cup of soup. Once he brought a small potted plant because, he said, the room needed life in it. He'd sit and tell me about his work, about the houses he was wiring, about the old lady down the street who kept asking him to fix things that weren't actually broken because she was lonely. Kind of like someone else I know, he'd said with a knowing smile. The nurses noticed. They'd comment on what a devoted son I had, and I'd stopped correcting them. Let them think what they wanted. Jamal showed more devotion in a single visit than Jason had shown in years. On the fourth day, a social worker came to see me. Sally. She had the worn, compassionate look of someone who'd heard every sad story and still managed to care. Helen, I'm here to talk with you about your discharge plan. The doctors say you'll be ready to leave in a few days, but we need to make sure you have adequate support at home. I'll be fine, I said automatically. She gave me a look that said she'd heard that before too. You've had major surgery. You have mobility restrictions. You can't lift anything over 5 pounds for at least 6 weeks. You'll need help with basic tasks. I'm staying with a friend for the first week or so. The young man who's been visiting. Jamal? Yes. She made a note. That's good. And after that, do you have family nearby who can check in on you? The question hung there like a trap. My son lives about 30 minutes away, I said carefully. Have you spoken with him about what kind of help he can provide? No, Sally looked up from her notes. Her expression was neutral, but I could see the question in her eyes. He's very busy, I added, hating myself for making excuses again. I see. She set down her pen. Helen, I'm going to be direct with you. This isn't the first time I've seen a situation like this. Family members who are absent during a medical crisis often remain absent during recovery. I want you to have realistic expectations about the support you'll actually receive. I know my son, I said, but even I could hear how hollow it sounded. I'm sure you do. But I also know that hoping for help that doesn't come is more damaging than accepting the reality and planning accordingly. She pulled out another form. I'd like to talk with you about updating your emergency contact information. My heart started beating faster. What do you mean? Right now, your son is still listed as your primary emergency contact and medical power of attorney. Given what happened when you were admitted, I'd strongly recommend reconsidering that arrangement. The room felt smaller. Changing my emergency contact felt like admitting defeat. Like officially acknowledging that my relationship with my son was broken beyond repair. But wasn't it? Hadn't the break already happened? I was just finally seeing it for what it was. What would I need to do? I asked quietly. It's a simple form. You designate someone else as your primary contact. Someone you trust to make medical decisions on your behalf if you're unable to. She paused. The young man who signed for your surgery. Would he be willing? I haven't asked him. Would you like me to ask him? He's in the waiting room. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Sally stepped out. A minute later, Jamal came in, his expression concerned. Miss Helen, everything okay? They want to change my emergency contact, I said. Remove Jason and put you instead. I know it's a lot to ask, and you don't have to say yes. He didn't hesitate. Of course, I'll do it. It's a big responsibility. Medical decisions, end-of-life care, all of it. I understand. Jamal, I need you to really think about this. If something happens to me, if I'm in a coma or worse, you'd be the one making the hard choices. He pulled the chair close and sat down, taking my hand. Miss Helen, I'd be honored to be that person for you. You trusted me with a lot more than that when I was just some punk kid stealing food. I'm not going to let you down now. Sally handed him the forms. He read through them carefully, asked a few questions about the legal implications, then signed his name in neat, careful letters. Just like that, my son was no longer the person who would speak for me if I couldn't speak for myself. How do you feel? He asked. Lighter, I admitted. And guilty for feeling lighter. Don't. You did what you needed to do. He squeezed my hand. And for what it's worth, I take this seriously. I promise I'll always advocate for what you want, not what's easiest. I know you will. That evening, after Jamal had gone home, I lay awake thinking about all the ways I'd tied myself to Jason. Emergency contacts, medical power of attorney, my will, which left everything to him. The key to my apartment that he'd never used. The standing invitation to Sunday dinners he'd stopped accepting years ago. All these threads connecting me to someone who'd made it clear I wasn't a priority. The next morning, a volunteer came around with a cart of books. Anything catch your interest, dear? She asked. I'm fine, thank you. She paused. You know, I've been volunteering here for 12 years. I've seen a lot of patients, and I've learned that the ones who do best are the ones who let people help them. Most of us aren't very good at that. We spend our whole lives taking care of other people. When it's our turn to receive care, we don't know how to accept it. She set a paperback on my side table. Something to think about. My phone sat silent on the table. No calls, no messages. On the 6th day, Jamal arrived with unexpected news. I talked to Dr. Shapiro this morning. He says you can be discharged tomorrow if you're ready. That's good. So, we'll get you settled at my place. Make sure you're comfortable and then we'll take it day by day. He sat down. But there's something else I want to talk with you about. Your apartment. When you're ready, I think we should go through it. Make sure it's set up for your recovery. Clear some space. Move furniture. Install some grab bars in the bathroom, that kind of thing. And while we're there, you should go through some of your paperwork. Your will. Your financial documents. Make sure everything reflects what you actually want, not what you set up 20 years ago when things were different. He was right, of course, but the thought of it exhausted me. Not everything has to be decided right now, Jamal continued. But start thinking about it. Start thinking about what you want your life to look like going forward. You wanted it. You don't. That last part hung in the air. I keep waiting for him to call, I admitted. I keep thinking maybe he'll come through that door and apologize and explain and make it all make sense somehow. And if he doesn't, then I guess I'll have my answer. Jamal nodded slowly. You deserve better than waiting for crumbs of affection from someone who should be giving you the whole loaf. The truth of that statement hit me hard. I'd been living on crumbs for years. A brief phone call here. An obligatory holiday visit there. An occasional love you, Mom, tossed out as he was hanging up. And I'd convinced myself that was enough. But it wasn't. It had never been enough. Tomorrow we get you out of here, Jamal said, standing up. And then we start figuring out what comes next. On your terms, not his. After he left, I did something I should have done days ago. I picked up my phone and opened my messages. Found Jason's name and I typed, I'm being discharged tomorrow. I'm staying with a friend for my recovery. I've changed my emergency contact. If you want to talk, you know where to find me. I read it 3 times. Then I hit send. The message showed as delivered. Then a minute later as read. I waited 10 minutes, 20, an hour. No response. And somehow that silence said more than any words could have. It told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in my son's life. Nowhere. I turned off my phone and set it face down on the table. Tomorrow I would leave this hospital room. Tomorrow I would start healing. Not just physically, but in all the other ways I'd been broken. And tomorrow, I would stop waiting for my son to become the person I'd always hoped he'd be. Because at 73 years old, I was finally learning that some people never change. And some silences are louder than screams. The next day, Jamal drove us to Patricia's house. It was a modest ranch in a quiet neighborhood. Cars lined the street, more people than I'd expected. My hands were shaking as we walked up the driveway. You don't have to do this, Jamal reminded me. Yes, I do. Patricia answered the door, pulling me into a careful hug. Helen. Oh, honey. Look at you. She pulled back, studying my face. You look tired. I am tired. She turned to Jamal. And you must be the guardian angel. Patricia Morrison. Jamal Carter, ma'am. Pleasure to meet you. The pleasure is mine. Any man who steps up the way you did is welcome in my home anytime. She ushered us inside. Everyone's in the living room. Fair warning, Jason's here with Brooke. The room went quiet when I walked in. Jason's face went pale. Brooke's expression was unreadable. Helen. Jason's grandmother, Dorothy, called out. Come here, child. Let me look at you. I made my way over to her, Jamal close behind me. Dorothy took my hands in hers. I heard you were in an accident. How are you healing? Slowly, but surely. And who's this handsome young man? This is Jamal. He's a friend. Her eyes sharpened. The friend who signed your surgery papers. Word traveled fast in this family. Yes, ma'am. She looked at Jamal for a long moment, then back at Jason, who was studiously avoiding everyone's eyes. Interesting. Very interesting. Patricia brought us plates of food. Jamal positioned himself between me and the rest of the room, a subtle but clear protective stance. Conversation resumed, but it was stilted. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. It was Jason's cousin, Michael, who finally broke the tension. So, Helen, we heard you had quite the ordeal. Must have been scary. It was. Jason said you're doing fine now, though. I looked at my son. He was staring at his plate. I'm alive, if that's what you mean. And this gentleman, Michael continued, gesturing to Jamal, he's the one who helped when you needed emergency surgery? Yes. Jamal signed the consent form so the doctors could operate. That was good of him. Michael paused. I'm a little confused, though. Why didn't Jason sign them? The room went completely silent. Jason's head snapped up. I don't think this is the time or place. I'd like to know, too, Dorothy said quietly. Why didn't you sign for your mother, Jason? Brooke started to speak, but Jason cut her off. It was a misunderstanding. The hospital didn't make it clear how serious it was. That's not true, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. The hospital called you multiple times, I continued, my voice steady. They told you explicitly that I needed emergency surgery or I might not survive. They begged you to come sign the papers. Mom, you're twisting what happened. Am I? I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded paper. My hands weren't shaking anymore. This is a transcript of the phone calls. The hospital provided it to me. Would you like me to read what you actually said? Jason stood up. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to be ambushed in front of my family. Sit down, Jason, Dorothy said, her voice soft, but carrying absolute authority. He sat. Helen, Dorothy continued. Read it. I unfolded the paper. The words I'd read a dozen times already, each time hoping they'd somehow be different. First call. 7:42 in the evening. Hospital. Is this Jason Whitmore? Jason. Yeah. Who's this? Hospital. This is County General Hospital. We have your mother, Helen Whitmore, in our emergency room. She's been in a serious car accident and needs immediate surgery. We need you to come in and sign consent forms. Jason, how serious? Hospital. Life-threatening. Without surgery in the next hour, she may not survive. Jason, I'm hosting Thanksgiving. If she dies, let me know. I'm not dealing with paperwork tonight. I looked up. The room was frozen. Every eye was on Jason. There were 3 more calls, I said quietly. Each one more urgent. You didn't answer any of them. Your wife finally answered the sixth call and said you'd deal with it after the holiday. Brooke had tears running down her face. Jason's mouth opened and closed. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were sober enough to host a party, Patricia said, her voice cold. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the people I was trying to impress. More important than your mother's life? Dorothy asked. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I asked. Explain it to me, Jason. Explain to everyone here why impressing your friends was more important than signing a paper that would save my life. You're making me out to be a monster. I'm not making you out to be anything. I'm simply telling people what happened. Michael spoke up. Jason, man, this is bad. This is really bad. You don't know what it's like, Jason said, his voice rising. Having her always needing something. Always calling. Always wanting me to visit. Always making me feel guilty for having my own life. The words hit like physical blows. When have I ever made you feel guilty? I asked. Every time you call. Every time you invite me over. Every time you ask about the kids. It's constant pressure. I call you once a week if you answer. It's still too much. Dorothy's voice cut through the room like a blade. Jason Michael Whitmore. Your father would be ashamed of you. Don't bring Dad into this. Your father spent his entire life teaching you about responsibility, about family, about showing up for the people who love you. Her voice shook with anger. And you couldn't be bothered to sign a piece of paper to save the woman who raised you alone after he died. I made a mistake. You made a choice, I said. And that choice showed me exactly where I stand in your life. Nowhere. Jason stood again. Fine. You want me to be the villain? I'll be the villain, but don't pretend you were some perfect mother. You were overbearing, clingy. You drove Dad crazy, and you drove me crazy too. The cruelty in his voice was stunning. But instead of breaking me, it crystallized something. You're right, I said calmly. I wasn't perfect. No parent is. But I loved you with everything I had. I worked 2 jobs to send you to college. I helped you when you were in financial trouble. I showed up for every milestone, even when you made it clear you didn't want me there. And when you needed me, I was there. Every single time. I stood up slowly. Jamal immediately at my side to steady me. But I'm done now. I'm done chasing a relationship with someone who doesn't want one. I'm done making excuses for your absence. I'm done pretending your cruelty is just your personality. I looked at him directly. You are no longer my emergency contact. You are no longer my medical power of attorney. And you are no longer welcome in my life unless and until you can treat me with basic human decency. So that's it? You're just cutting me off. No, Jason. You cut me off years ago. I'm just finally accepting it. I turned to Patricia. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry to leave early. Don't apologize, honey. You said what needed to be said. Jamal and I walked to the door. Behind us, I could hear raised voices. Jason arguing with his grandmother, Brooke crying. Patricia telling Jason exactly what she thought of his behavior. But I didn't look back. We got in the car. Jamal started the engine but didn't pull away immediately. How do you feel? He asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Free, I finally said. I feel free. And for the first time in 20 years, I meant it. The drive back to Jamal's house was quiet. Not the uncomfortable silence that demands to be filled, but the peaceful kind that comes after a storm has passed. I watched the houses go by, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows, and felt something shift inside me. You did good back there, Jamal said as we pulled into his driveway. I said things I could never take back. You said things that needed to be said. He turned off the engine and looked at me. Miss Helen, you spent 20 years biting your tongue, swallowing hurt, making yourself smaller so he wouldn't be uncomfortable. Today, you took up space. That's not something to regret. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd spent so long apologizing for existing in my son's life that I'd forgotten I had a right to exist at all. Jamal's house was small but well kept. A 2-bedroom ranch with a tidy yard. Nothing fancy, but it was warm, lived in, real. He helped me out of the car, mindful of my ribs. I'm going to make us some tea, he said. You go rest. Doctor's orders. I settled into the recliner he'd set up for me in the living room. The care he'd put into making me comfortable was evident in every detail. While he was in the kitchen, I looked around. It was clearly a bachelor space, but not in the stereotypical way. Just simple, practical furniture and a few personal touches. A bookshelf filled with technical manuals and mystery novels. Some framed photos on the mantel. I stood slowly and made my way over to look at them. One showed Jamal in firefighter gear, younger, grinning beside a fire truck. Another was him shaking hands with someone at what looked like a graduation, trade school, probably. And there, in a simple wooden frame, was a photo I recognized. It was from years ago. Jamal at my kitchen table, maybe 17 or 18, bent over a textbook. I was in the background, stirring something on the stove. I didn't even remember someone taking that picture. Found that on an old phone, Jamal said from behind me. He'd come in carrying 2 mugs. Thought about throwing it away a dozen times, but I couldn't. Why not? Because that was the first place I ever felt safe. He handed me a mug. That kitchen, that table, you making dinner like it was the most natural thing in the world to feed some random kid who wasn't yours. I traced the frame with my finger. You weren't random. I was at first. You didn't know me from anyone. No, but I knew hungry when I saw it. And lonely. I knew those things very well. We settled into our seats. Can I ask you something? Jamal said after a moment. Really? You had your own struggles. Your own life. Why take on someone else's problems? I thought back to that time. My husband gone 5 years. Jason at college, calling less. I was working 2 jobs to pay off medical bills. I was tired, lonely, barely keeping my head above water. Because when my husband was sick, I said slowly, people helped us. Neighbors brought casseroles. Church members drove us to appointments. Strangers donated to help with bills. I couldn't pay any of them back, but I thought maybe I could pay it forward. So I was a good deed. No, you were a person who needed help. That's different. I sipped my tea. And, honestly, you helped me too. Gave me a reason to cook real meals instead of eating cereal for dinner. Gave me someone to talk to. Made the house feel less empty. I never knew that. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me. You didn't. You don't. But I do owe you, he said quietly. Not in a debt kind of way, but in a gratitude way. You changed my life, Miss Helen. You made me believe I was worth something. You were always worth something. Not to anyone else. Foster parents who saw me as a paycheck. Teachers who'd already written me off. Kids at school treated me like I was invisible. He set his mug down. But you saw me. And you treated me like I mattered. You did matter. I know that now. Because you taught me. He leaned forward. That's what I want to give back to you now. That feeling that you matter, that someone sees you. The tears came without warning, hot and fast. I just never expected, I managed between sobs, that the person who'd show up for me would be you. Not my own son, but a boy I knew for a few years 15 years ago. Maybe that's the point. Maybe real family isn't always the one you're born into. Over the next few days, we settled into a routine. Jamal would work in the mornings from his home office. I'd rest, read, watch the birds at the feeder he'd hung outside the window. In the afternoons, he'd make lunch, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. He told me about his business. I told him about my volunteer work at the library, the book club. My small life that had felt even smaller since Jason had pulled away. Why did you stop volunteering? He asked one day. Jason said it was too much for someone my age, that I should slow down, take it easy. And you listened to him. He's my son. I thought he was worried about me. Or maybe he just didn't want you to have a life that didn't revolve around waiting for his phone calls. The observation stung, because it was true. One evening, Jamal brought home takeout from a Thai restaurant. As we ate pad Thai, he said, I've been thinking about something. That transcript you read? The one from the hospital? Did you make copies? I nodded. The hospital gave me several. Why? Because I think you should keep them somewhere safe. Not because you're going to need them. But because if Jason tries to rewrite history, tries to tell people a different version of what happened, you'll have proof. I don't want to use it as a weapon. It's not a weapon. It's protection. There's a difference. He twirled noodles around his fork. People like your son, they're good at making themselves look like victims. At twisting things so they come out looking better than they are. You need to protect yourself from that. He was right. Of course. Already I could imagine Jason spinning the story. I'll keep them safe, I promised. Good. And Miss Helen, there's something else we need to talk about. Your apartment. You're going to need to go back eventually. And when you do, I think you should make some changes. What kind of changes? Legal ones. Financial ones. Make sure your will reflects what you actually want. Make sure your accounts are set up right. Make sure that if something happens to you, your wishes are followed. He paused. Right now, is Jason listed as beneficiary on anything? I thought about it. My life insurance. My retirement account. I think he's the executor of my will. And is that what you still want? The question hung there. A year ago, even a month ago, I would have said yes automatically. Of course, Jason should inherit. That's how it works. But now I admitted I don't know. That's fair. You don't have to decide right now, but you should think about it. Really think about it. He met my eyes. Who do you want making decisions for you if you can't make them yourself? Who do you trust with your final wishes? Who actually deserves the things you've worked hard for? They were hard questions, the kind I'd avoided for years because facing them meant facing uncomfortable truths. I always assumed family meant blood, I said quietly, that being a mother meant my son came first, no matter what. But what if he doesn't act like family? What if he doesn't treat you like his mother? Then what am I supposed to do? Choose the family that chooses you. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Miss Helen, I'm not trying to turn you against your son. If he wakes up tomorrow and realizes what he's lost and tries to make it right, that's between you and him. But in the meantime, you deserve to be surrounded by people who actually care, who actually show up. That night, lying in the guest bed, I thought about family. About what it meant. About the difference between obligation and love. Jason was my son. That was biology. History. 20 years of my life poured into raising him. But Jamal was here. Present. Caring for me without being asked, without expecting anything in return. Which one was really family? The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and something baking. I made my way slowly to the kitchen to find Jamal pulling muffins out of the oven. Blueberry, he said with a grin. Still your favorite, right? You remembered. I remember everything you taught me, Miss Helen. Including how to take care of people who matter. We ate breakfast together. And I realized something profound. I'd spent 20 years trying to earn my son's love. But here was someone who loved me freely, without conditions, without keeping score. Here was someone who'd remembered my favorite muffin flavor after 15 years. Here was someone who showed up. And maybe that was what family really meant. Not the people you're bound to by blood, but the people who choose to bind themselves to you through loyalty, through care, through presence. Jamal, I said as he refilled my coffee. Thank you. For what? For being here. For remembering. For showing me what it feels like to actually matter to someone. He sat down the coffee pot and came around the table. He hugged me carefully, mindful of my still healing ribs. You've always mattered, Miss Helen, he said quietly. Some people were just too blind to see it. And standing there in that small kitchen, wrapped in a gentle hug from someone who wasn't my son, but felt more like family than my son ever had, I finally understood. I hadn't lost a son. When Jason turned away, I'd gained something better. I'd gained someone who knew what it meant to show up, and that was worth more than all the blood ties in the world. 2 weeks before Christmas, I finally felt strong enough to return to my apartment. Jamal drove me, insisting on carrying everything up the stairs. Despite my protests that I could manage, the apartment felt different, smaller, somehow quieter. Like it belonged to a different version of me. You okay? Jamal asked, setting my bag down. Just strange being back. Want me to stay for a bit? Help you settle in? I think I need to do this part alone, but thank you. He hugged me carefully. Call me if you need anything. And I mean anything, even if it's just to talk. After he left, I walked through the rooms, taking inventory, not just of my belongings, but of my life. This was where I'd lived for 8 years. Where I'd waited for phone calls that rarely came. Where I'd made excuses and swallowed hurt and convinced myself that distance was normal. In the bedroom closet, I found the boxes I'd been avoiding. Old photos, letters, birthday cards Jason had sent over the years, each one more generic than the last. I sat on the floor and went through them. The shift had been gradual. When he was young, the cards were personal. Hand-drawn pictures, messages that said, I love you, Mom. But as he got older, they became store-bought cards with his signature and nothing more. Then they came late. Then they stopped coming at all. I told myself he was just busy. But the truth was simpler and harder. He'd stopped caring. My phone rang. An unknown number again. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello. Helen, it's Dorothy. Jason's grandmother. I hadn't spoken to her since the confrontation at Patricia's house. Dorothy, hello. I wanted to check on you, dear. See how you're healing. Better every day. Thank you for asking. Good. That's good. She paused. I also wanted you to know that I had a long conversation with Jason after you left. Several conversations, actually. My heart started beating faster. Oh, he's struggling, Helen. With what happened. With what he said. With the consequences of his choices. Is he calling to apologize? No. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Her voice was gentle, but firm. My grandson is proud. Too proud. He's convinced himself that you overreacted, that the family turned against him unfairly. He's built himself a story where he's the victim. The words settled over me like a cold blanket. I see. I don't say this to hurt you. I say it so you'll know where things stand. So you won't sit around hoping for something that isn't coming. I appreciate that. You deserve better than what he's given you. You always have, she sighed. I'm ashamed that I didn't see it sooner. Didn't call him out on his behavior years ago, but I'm seeing it now, and I want you to know that whatever you decide to do, you have my support. After we hung up, I sat with that information. Jason wasn't going to apologize. Wasn't going to change. Wasn't going to suddenly wake up and realize what he'd lost. And strangely, that knowledge didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Because I'd already started letting go. I spent the afternoon going through paperwork. Bank statements. Insurance policies. The will I drafted 10 years ago that left everything to Jason. I thought about what Jamal had said, about making sure my wishes were actually reflected in my legal documents, about choosing the family that chose me. The next morning, I called an attorney. Her name was Ruth Sanderson. Her office was warm and professional, and she listened without judgment as I explained my situation. So, you want to change your beneficiaries, she said, making notes. Yes. And my executor. And my medical directives. All of it. And you're certain about this? I ask because family situations can be complicated, and sometimes people make decisions in anger that they later regret. I'm certain. This isn't anger. This is clarity. Over the next hour, we went through everything. My life insurance policy, which I split between Jamal and several charities I cared about. My retirement accounts, which I redirected to Jamal as primary beneficiary. My will, which I rewrote entirely. What about personal items? Ruth asked. Photos, jewelry, things with sentimental value. I thought about it. There's a watch that belonged to my late husband. His wedding ring. Some photos from when Jason was young. I'd like those to go to Jason with a letter. What kind of letter? One that explains my choices. Not to hurt him, but to help him understand. If he's ever ready to understand. Ruth nodded. I think that's wise. Giving him something personal shows you're not acting out of spite. You're acting out of self-preservation. Exactly. The paperwork took several days to finalize. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Each decision felt like choosing my own worth over someone else's indifference. When it was done, I had copies of everything in a folder. Proof that I'd taken control of my own life. That I'd stopped waiting for someone else to validate my existence. Christmas approached. In past years, I would have been anxious about it. Wondering if Jason would invite me, hoping for a few hours with my grandchildren. preparing myself for disappointment. This year was different. Jamal called on December 20th. What are you doing for Christmas? Nothing special. Why? Come spend it with me. I'm having a few people over. Nothing fancy. Just dinner and some music. People I care about. I don't want to impose. Miss Helen, when are you going to stop saying that? You're not in a position. You're invited. There's a difference. Christmas morning. I woke in my own bed and didn't feel the usual dread. Didn't spend the morning checking my phone for messages that would never come. Instead, I got dressed, wrapped the small gifts I'd bought for Jamal and his friends, and drove to his house. The gathering was small. Jamal, me, and 3 other people. 2 were colleagues from his electrical business. The third was an older man named Frank, who lived next door and had become Jamal's unofficial mentor. We ate a meal that everyone had contributed to. I'd made my green bean casserole, the one Jason used to ask for. And for the first time in years, someone actually complimented it. We talked and laughed and shared stories. No one asked about my family. No one made me feel like I was someone's charity case. I was just Helen, just a person at a table full of people who wanted me there. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Jason. Everyone in the kitchen was quiet. They could see my face. You want privacy? Jamal asked. I looked at the phone, at my son's name on the screen, at the call I'd been waiting for. And I let it go to voicemail. No, I said. I'm right where I want to be. The relief on Jamal's face was immediate. You sure? I'm sure. Later, after everyone had gone home except Jamal and me, I listened to the voicemail. Mom, it's me, Jason. I wanted to call and say Merry Christmas. The kids asked about you. Thought maybe we could talk sometime. Give me a call back. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened. Just a casual message like nothing had changed. I saved the voicemail but didn't call back. Instead, I sent a text. Merry Christmas, Jason. I'm glad the kids thought of me. When you're ready to have a real conversation about what happened, I'm willing to listen. Until then, I need space. Take care of yourself. His response came 20 minutes later. You're really going to do this? Cut me off over one mistake. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed, this isn't about one mistake. This is about 20 years of patterns. When you're ready to see that, we can talk. I hope someday you will be. I didn't wait for a response. Just set the phone down and turned to Jamal, who was pretending to organize his kitchen, but was clearly listening. How do you feel? He asked. Sad, but also okay. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. We sat in his living room, the Christmas tree lights twinkling. Outside, snow had started to fall. You know what the funny thing is? I said. I thought my revenge would be dramatic, cutting him out of my will, confronting him, making him feel the hurt he made me feel. And the real revenge is this. I gestured around the cozy living room. Living my life. Being happy. Surrounding myself with people who actually care. Not needing him anymore. I smiled. He wanted me to disappear. To stop being a burden. To stop needing him. Well, I did exactly that. And now I'm fine. Better than fine. That's the best kind of revenge, Jamal said. Living well, despite someone who tried to make you feel small. I still love him, you know. He's still my son. That doesn't just go away. No, it doesn't. But love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. You can love someone from a distance. You can wish them well while protecting yourself from their harm. He was right, as he usually was. Thank you, I said, for everything. For showing up at that hospital. For taking me in. For reminding me that I'm worth caring about. Miss Helen, you don't need to thank me. This is what family does. But you're not actually family. He smiled. Yes, I am. Just not the kind that shares blood. The kind that shares something better. Loyalty. Care. Choice. And sitting there in that warm living room, with snow falling outside and a man who'd remembered my favorite muffins keeping me company, I realized something profound. My life had almost ended on that highway. The car accident could have killed me. Or if not that, then Jason's refusal to sign those papers could have. But I'd survived. And in surviving, I discovered something I'd been missing for years. My worth wasn't tied to being someone's mother. It wasn't tied to being needed or wanted or validated by the child I'd raised. My worth was inherent, unchanging. And the people who saw it, who valued it, who showed up for it, those were the people who deserved space in my life. Jason had made his choice. He'd chosen his comfort, his convenience, his pride over his relationship with me. And now I was making mine. I was choosing peace. I was choosing people who showed up. I was choosing myself. That was my revenge. Not loud or dramatic or vindictive. Just quiet, powerful. I'd stopped chasing love from someone who couldn't give it. And I'd opened my life to love from someone who already had. New Year's Eve came. Jamal and I watched the countdown on television, ate too much cheese and crackers, and toasted with sparkling cider at midnight. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. To found family, I replied. To people who show up. To people who show up. We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that Jason would change. Not hope that things would go back to how they used to be. But hope for the future I was building, for the life I was choosing, for the person I was becoming. I was 73 years old. I'd almost died. I'd been abandoned by my own son. I'd lost the family I thought I had. But I'd gained something infinitely more valuable. I gained myself back. And I gained a family that actually deserved the name. So here's what I want you to understand. Whoever's listening to this story, family isn't always blood. Love isn't always unconditional. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who make you feel small. My son refused my emergency surgery. He told the hospital to let him know if I died. He chose a party over my life. But someone else showed up. Someone I'd helped years ago when he had nothing. Someone who remembered kindness and returned it 1,000-fold. That's the person who became my family. That's the person who showed me what real love looks like. And that's the revenge I chose. Not hurting Jason. Not punishing him. Not making him pay. Just living my life, being happy, choosing people who chose me. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's showing them they didn't break you. It's proving you're fine without them. It's building a life so full of genuine love that their absence doesn't even leave a hole. That's what I did. And if you're in a similar situation, dealing with family who treats you like you don't matter, who takes you for granted, who only shows up when it's convenient for them, I want you to know something. You deserve better. You deserve people who show up. You deserve to be chosen. And if the family you were born into can't give you that, then find the family who can. Because at the end of the day, the people who love you will show it. And the people who don't, they're not worth your time. So, here's my advice. Stop chasing people who don't chase you back. Stop making excuses for people who don't show up. Stop accepting crumbs when you deserve the whole meal. Choose yourself. Choose peace. Choose the people who choose you. That's the real revenge. That's the real victory. That's the real happy ending. And I'm living it every single day. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where family let you down? Where someone who should have been there wasn't? How did you handle it? Tell me in the comments below, I really want to know.